Welcome to the Raising Confident Girls podcast, your guide to raising strong, confident daughters. I'm Melissa Jones, the founder of Girls Positivity Club and a teacher for over 20 years. In a world where girls often feel overwhelmed, anxious, and confused, this podcast is your go-to space. As caregivers, we navigate challenges together. I founded Girls Positivity Club to provide a place where you belong and get the tools to face today's hurdles. Consider this your regular check-in with a trusted friend, offering insights and practical tips for meaningful conversations. I'm here to help you feel confident on this journey of raising a generation of empowered girls. Let's dive in and raise those confident girls together. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Raising Confident Girls. I'm so happy you're here today, and we have a good topic that comes up a lot, and it's kind of gone along the theme the last couple weeks, and that is comparison and girls not falling into the I'm not as good as her trap. But before we get into the episode, I wanted to thank you so much, whether it's your first time or you've been here many times, and to remind you that the best compliment that you can give is to send this episode or this show to another parent or caregiver of a girl. It would mean the absolute world, because the mission of Girls Positivity Club and Raising Confident Girls is to help as many girls and families as possible. So this episode topic comes from just everything that I've been thinking about as girls, go back to school, and or if you're in a different part of the world, they're in the middle of school or toward the end of the school year if you're in Australia. And it's really common for this to come up in lots of different ways. And that is girls not feeling as good as other girls. And some girls are outward and speak openly about it, while other girls kind of internalize it and don't really know how to say it, or they feel embarrassed that they feel that way because they know they shouldn't. So when I was young, I had this all the time. And I've talked about this. If you've heard my story in the very first episode, you'll know that, and I'll bring this up several times, just to remind everybody and keep us all on the same page. But yeah, I had that a lot growing up. So I was in constant chaos inside, and some people wouldn't know that about me by looking at me on the outside. I did cry a lot. So that was my way of trying to figure out how to get those feelings out, because I felt like I was crying on the inside a lot. But I would compare myself constantly. And it was at school, like with girls with that, they're smarter than me, or their bodies, or the way they looked, like their hairstyle, or their, how thin they were, or who they hung out with, and, wanting to be in that certain crowd that had a lot of friends and seemed to have the happiest life, and all those things. And even relatives, like even with my cousins, I would compare myself to my cousins. And I think that it becomes a habit. It becomes a bad habit that, not to shame anybody for, because I didn't know what to do. I didn't, even though I talked to my mom about it, about some of my feelings, I still just had this internal, feeling of wanting to be like other girls and not feeling like I was ever good enough. That's why I've never really seen myself as, certain ways that other people see me. They'll give me a compliment, and I've really worked hard on, accepting that. And, obviously compliments feel great, but just really believing in myself. And that's taken so many years. And that's really the intention of Girls Positivity Club, is so that girls don't have to go their whole lives not knowing how to do some of these things, or really all of these things, and they get the tools while they're growing up. And it's to empower you to help support your daughters along the way, because, like I've talked about before, my mom didn't really know how to help me because she also struggled with her own self-esteem. And so, really, I think about, my darkest moment, and this is another huge why for me is, I would compare myself to my cousin. And I have mentioned this on previous episodes, but if you haven't heard it, or just to refresh your memory, I had a cousin who seemed to have a perfect life. Like, she's beautiful. She had like all the fancy clothes. She had, the popularity, the boyfriend, the like seemingly perfect life. And she was always kind to me. She was never mean. She never made me feel less than. But because she had those ideal things that I thought made a person perfect, or, happier, or what you're supposed to live like, it seemed like an unreachable, attainable lifestyle for me, because I felt like I was so far away from that. And every time we would spend time together, we would go and spend like a week at a time, with them when we would go on vacation. We would be sitting in the car, and I would compare the size of my legs to hers. I would compare my hairstyle. And this again is when we were just sitting next to each other. And it just was on replay for me, of like constantly looking for, you know, evidence of things that proved that I wasn't as good as her. And again, she is like the kindest person, and as an adult, even like I she had no idea that she even was making me feel this way. I never expressed it to her because I was embarrassed. So I was one who, even though I had a really strong relationship with my mom and still do, I felt embarrassed to say these things. I still did say some of it and just told her, like, this is how I feel when I'm around her. And obviously she's family and was never mean to me. So I did want to be around her, but my mom would help me, the best she could with, like, well, when you're sitting next to her, just think about the fun time you're having together, not about the size of your legs, because that part doesn't matter. And those things did help. And like I said, she did help me as much as she could, but I still did it. And, I think about girls today, and it's like, social media is such an easy way for them to compare. And I think about, when I was growing up, it was magazines. I got magazines that were like Girls Life, Young Miss, all these, and back then they would have models in them, and I would do the same thing, or I'd take these quizzes like about, are you, whatever, are you the right size? Are you whatever the quiz would be? I don't even remember off the top of my head, but I just remember laying on my bed for hours and just going through that magazine and just finding, again, evidence that I wasn't as good as the people in the magazine. And, it's hard to admit that, because it sounds kind of crazy, to say that I did that so much. But I want to keep it real with you, because, that's what this podcast is, me sharing insight based on, the work that I've done with girls. And, over 23 years of teaching, what I've seen in girls is very similar to what I experienced, of differing degrees. And the whole purpose is to prevent, them from going down that, where they have to, even into adulthood, fight that off, and really not know how to control that inner chaos. And so, when I think about girls scrolling on social media, I've mentioned this in a previous episode, where they look at people as having a perfect life. And I think as moms and as parents, we can do the same thing. It's like, you can look at someone who's super fit, or they meal prep every week, or they have the picture with the dogs and the house and the yard and all these things, and it can make you feel really small, because you can be like, gosh, I want those things. My laundry's piled up. I don't even know what we ate for dinner last night. We ate like frozen food and, whatever. And I just feel like I'm so far away from that unattainable, like perfect life. And our girls can feel like that too. Especially with social media. And, it's a personal decision whether you let your daughter, have social media. And I think if you do, you have to be really intentional about it and teach her how to check in with herself, and see, like, am I posting things just to look like I have a perfect life? Or am I following people that are not making me feel good and make me feel less than? And just knowing that, things that people post are not their whole life. It's just a snapshot. It's a highlight reel of positive things in their life, or, just things that are filtered, that aren't telling the whole picture of what's really going on. It doesn't mean that people have a bad life and they're fake or anything like that, but it's not sharing that, maybe your dog is needing surgery and you're really concerned about that, like mine. And, maybe there's a family member having health problems and they don't really want to be public about it. So you don't want to, share about, a family member who's really sick and it's really bothering you because you love them and you're worried about them, but, you're showing a picture, of maybe yourself posing in front of, whatever. So I'm thinking like as the girls, and it's having conversations with her about those things. And, I think about girls that I've talked with in my clubs and camps and Girls Positivity Club. And, especially as they start to get older, they start to notice appearance. And, one girl was talking about like, my stomach isn't flat. And, if you think about it, a lot of people you see online, they do have a flat stomach or they have abs or, whatever. And it's helping them see that there are all shapes and sizes that are beautiful. And, just because your friend has a flat stomach, it doesn't mean that you're supposed to, or everybody's supposed to have a naturally flat stomach. There are just some people that are naturally skinny and they don't really have to do much. That's just the way that their body is. And, that's one of just their traits in their body and they can't help it. Just like, everybody has their own unique things about them. So it doesn't make it better or worse. It just, having those conversations about things like that. And, it's like there's nothing wrong with you if your body doesn't look exactly like your friends. I think it's even harder when girls are together and they start complaining about body parts and start being like, I'm so fat. And they talk like that when it's a person who's really thin. And then the person who does maybe have a little bit of a belly or, they are kind of insecure about a certain part of their body because it's developing and changing. I think we've all been through that where, something hasn't developed at the same time as someone else. And you're like, why does she have boobs and I don't? Or why has she started her period and I haven't? Why, is her stomach flat and mine isn't? Like, those are all things that come up with girls, especially when they're together. And it doesn't mean that it's a vain girl or someone who isn't a good friend to your daughter. It's just those things can come up because they're trying to figure things out. And, that's why those check-ins are so very important. And, it's really supporting them through that. And I found some statistics that were, eye-opening to not scare you, but just bring your awareness to the seriousness of it. And, I love Dove. They do a self-esteem project and they do a lot of research around the country. And one of the studies showed that 70% of girls feel like they don't measure up in some way, whether that be appearance, whether that be, the way they look, whether that be in some other area of their life. And so that's based on their research. And so that is something that, 70%, like that's 7 out of 10 girls. And that's a startling statistic because, we really want to support our girls as much as possible in knowing how to handle things like, these kinds of feelings and this kind of comparison. Another one was 80% of girls, this is done by the Boys and Girls Club. They did a huge study. And 80% of girls have downloaded in their study a filter to change their appearance in some way. So this was a national study. This is thousands of girls, and 80%, like 8 out of 10 girls, have downloaded a filter so that they look better in their mind. And then the last one is by the American Psychological Association. 60% of girls think that they're supposed to appear attractive, whether online, in pictures, just in life, they're supposed to be attractive, and 50% are supposed to be thin. So those are, really big statistics that I think are just eye-opening. And those are just a few studies that show the problem of the I'm not as good as her type of mentality. So this is a podcast where I do give you tips for what to do because we can, all think about these things and start to, worry and think, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I don't want my daughter to be in that situation. So if you've listened to episodes before, you'll know that I like an acronym. And so the one that I chose for today is GROW, because this is something that, they're going to go through and grow through as they're growing up in many different, variations. So the G is for guide her to identify those triggers. So who makes them feel less than? What situations make them feel less than? So that doesn't mean that they're never going to feel this, but it's trying to teach them to avoid those types of situations if they can help it, or to catch themselves when they're comparing and thinking like, oh, well, I don't know if I'm as good as this person in this certain area. And so just raising her awareness, that I'm big on self-awareness, raising her awareness and guiding her to identify those triggers and having conversations like, is it when you're scrolling? Is it when you are around your cousins? Like, is it when there's a sleepover and you're all in front of the mirror together? When is it that those things come up for you? The R is then to reframe it. So, looking at differences as strengths and unique qualities. So, everybody has their own uniqueness. And just like with my cousin, like there were certain things about her that were unique to her. And I didn't have to be exactly like her in order to be good enough. And, it's just helping her see her own strengths and asking her like, well, what are your strengths? What are things that you're really good at? And, I think just reframing and thinking, like stopping them in that moment and being like, okay, when you catch yourself comparing your size or comparing your grades or comparing whatever and thinking I'm not as good as, think, okay, those are her strengths. What are mine? And just have her think of a few things that are strengths, and you can help her with that. She can also make it visual and write those things down and have them like displayed in her room somewhere beside her bedside table. However you want to do that. I'm a really big fan of visuals and those positive reminders. The O is for opening up about her feelings, and saying things like, I've noticed you've been a little bit quieter than usual after practice, or I've noticed you've been, a little bit quieter when we are, and you could just fill in the blank, or after you've been on social media, or after you've gone to music class, or, you know, at the end of the day after school. I'm just checking in. Is everything good? Or is there anything you want to talk about? Because it's allowing them and just showing them that you're noticing, um, the change in behavior, or that you are aware of it, which is really good, because then it opens up that conversation where she doesn't always have to bring it up. And then just asking, like, is something on your mind? You've been a little bit quiet, or I've noticed you've been deep in thought lately in this certain situation. And not being afraid to say during those check-in times, I'm a big fan of car rides and bedtime, or any time that it just works out. Sometimes those times are very unexpected. You can be outside on a walk and it's like, oh, I think this is a good time. And you can say something like, have you ever felt like you're not as good as someone else, like as another girl, or does that ever cross your mind, or not really? Um, and say like, it's okay to talk about it if it is, and and if you haven't, that's fine too. So never again, like I always say this, like it's never to create a problem for her, to create like a worry or anything like that, but at the same time it's acknowledging. Like you could even say it like, when I was younger, sometimes when I would, give an example, be at my practice, I would have to work a little bit harder than anyone else. And I always kind of looked at the other players who it seemed to come more naturally to, and compare myself sometimes. Have you ever done that in any way? And, this could be in academics. I used to see this a lot with reading groups or math groups. And even though nowadays, like you don't really announce the level of the groups, the kids know. They know, because sometimes you do have to do groups in order to meet everybody at their needs. It's a way to differentiate the instruction. And you never, you try and mix up groups and camouflage it as much as you can, but kids know. They know the kids that are really quick with math, or are really good at a certain thing and they think that, ooh, if I'm in their group, then I'm good too. Or if I'm not in that group, I must be in the less than group. Like I'm not as smart as them or something like that. So just checking in about different areas of their life. And, obviously these are not the only two ways to ask her, but just want to check in about, how you're feeling, in your classes or, whatever that would be. Just keeping it really open-ended is a really powerful way to just get a gauge on where she is. And then the last one is wins. The W in grow is wins, focusing on the wins, the strengths, the personal goals, helping her look for the yays. I always say that's such a big staple in Girls Positivity Club, is to look for the wins or look for the yays. And so just bringing that to her awareness, and even having like a goal board or a vision board. And these things, again, don't have to be unattainable. They can be things that she's wanting to do in her life, and they can be a good reminder of her own progress. And I'm a big fan of praising effort, just helping her see how far she's come in certain areas, and to point out those wins and those growth moments and those times when she's really accomplished something on her own. And not even on her own. Sometimes you have help, and that's a good thing too. That's a win as well. Asking for help is such a big thing as well. And so, those are just a few ways that you can support your daughter in escaping this I'm not as good as her trap. And, the positive outcomes of this are teaching her how to manage these things, like I said, while she's growing up, so that her self-esteem doesn't suffer and she doesn't develop these patterns that stick with her for years and years, like they did with me. And it's taken me a lot of work to work on these things, and and to teach those to the girls. That's why I'm so passionate about it, because I don't want a girl to have to struggle through the way I did and the way so many of us have in some of these things. So, it helps her be more resilient, have higher self-esteem, be better equipped as she's growing up, so that when she's an adult, she has better tools. And it doesn't mean that she's never in her life going to compare herself, but she'll be better equipped to handle it in healthy ways. So I hope this was helpful. If you have a daughter who has gone through this, I'd love to hear from you in anything that's helped, or if you need support in a certain area, I'm always open to ideas for show topics. So please feel free to reach out to me at Girls Positivity Club. You can go to the website. There's a contact page. It's just girlspositivityclub.org. And Girls Positivity Club across all social media. So thank you so much. And, remember this for yourself too. You don't have to compare yourself to any other parent. Your daughter loves you because you're you. And that's a huge, huge strength. So thank you for being here so much, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for joining another empowering episode of the Raising Confident Girls podcast. Share today's insights with caregivers and friends, building beautiful relationships with strong girls. Hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. We're not just a podcast, we're a community. Follow Girls Positivity Club on social media for more empowering content on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. This podcast empowers you, supporting incredible girls. Let's create strong, beautiful relationships with the girls in our lives. I appreciate you listening today. Stay confident, stay connected. Until next time, keep raising those confident girls. You've got this.